Guys, welcome back to another episode of The Curious Cat, where I like to stay curious and explore all kinds of different topics. I like to speak off the cuff about different things and get you guys thinking and looking outside of the mainstream narrative for potential solutions and ways that we can overcome the challenges that we are being faced with. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing finance, kind of what millennials are facing, why we're all being knocked into poverty, the growing wealth gap, how come that's happening, and how they have us backed into a corner and how the game has changed. So if you want to learn more about this, to gain information so that you can make better informed decisions about the way to move forward, then please stick around till the end of this video, as I'll be discussing multiple trends in the market and things that we can be aware of so that we can make better decisions financially moving forward. So with that being said, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, hit like on the video, and share it with friends and family. It helps me get the info out there. And with that being said, I'll get right into it. So if we look at the boomers, we look at Gen X, and then we look at millennials. So by the time the baby boomers were the median age of 35, they had accumulated 25% of the world's wealth. And then we had Gen X come along and they accumulated 7%, I think, or 10% of the world's wealth. And then the millennials, by the time they hit age 35, they're only accumulating 3% of the world's wealth. So you can see it's just dropping more and more, and the younger generations have very little wealth. We have student loan debt in the trillions of dollars now, and most millennials under age 30 would describe themselves as poor. So very few people are thriving, and this is a growing concern. People are maxed out on debt, and people are playing by the old rules. They're trying to do what their parents did, get a job, buy a house, and they're finding that they're just not getting ahead that way. So if you see how the savings rates are way down, people don't have any money anymore. They're maxed out on debt. The average wage hasn't really moved that much since the boomers were our age. And now we have house prices that have 10x'd and cost of living that is way higher. So the money's debasing, the job opportunities aren't there. We're going into an economic crisis, and people are buying homes that are 10 times the cost of what the boomers paid, and we don't have the financial capital available, we don't have the job opportunities and all that. So why are we playing by the old rules? Why are we trying to follow the footsteps of our parents? Those rules no longer apply. They don't work. So the baby boomers did all right by doing that, getting a job, buying real estate, and just kind of working away and paying that off. But those rules don't work anymore. The game has changed. And if we're going to try and play by the old rules, you're going to be the status quo and you're going to get knocked into poverty. So in this channel, I discuss these trends a lot. I kind of go over what's going on in markets. I love looking at charts and reading them and looking at trends and kind of trying to get an idea of where things might head. And I share a lot about that on this channel. So please look back through my past videos and do your best to get informed, read around, and really look into this stuff because it helps us make better decisions moving forward. So when house prices have 10x'd in a lot of areas, especially here in Canada, the prices of homes have just gone insane because of the debasement of the currency, and the governments are fully corrupt. They allowed in all of this corrupt foreign investment money where they're allowing numbered corporations, which is basically a way that people can buy real estate here without disclosing who they are or where the money came from. So they allowed all this black market money to come into the Canadian real estate market and buy up all of our city centers, so especially Toronto and Vancouver. And then what that did is the prices went exponential there as they allowed all this money to flow into our economies, and then that pushed out your average resident of these cities and pushed them out into smaller towns and cities in Canada, which further drove the price up in these other cities. So prices went up and up and up, and at the same time we had our governments printing record amounts of currency and putting into circulation through the form of debt, which further pushed the prices of homes up. So this has left millennials, the younger generations, with home prices far out of reach, and those that are trying to do it the old way, that are trying to get into real estate, they're seeing this exponential rise in prices, so they think that that's going to continue, and they think that's the way to get ahead. So they do what they can. They get a job, they go and sign a loan with the bank, and now they're buying these homes at overinflated prices, and they're exposing themselves to tremendous amounts of debt. And now we have our economy going into the shitter here and tanking. And so how are we supposed to pay back these large amounts of debt? So all these trends are pretty alarming. I think it's something people should be paying a little more attention to. It's really sad to see how the governments they've knowingly allowed this. They had knowingly allowed all this foreign investment to come in. They knowingly printed the currency into oblivion and debased the currency, which means that everything costs more and more, and we have less opportunity. Our dollars buy us less, and the wages barely moved. So that really destroys our opportunity to acquire more capital, and that's left us with very few opportunities as younger generations. This to me is very frustrating. I think they should all be tried in criminal courts for this. It's very, very shady what they've done. And then they, of course, it doesn't matter to them because they buy up all these assets and they put all of their capital into these assets, so they ride it up with the inflation that's caused by the debasement of these currencies. So for your average millennial, the younger generations, they've really backed us into a corner. The prices of real estate everywhere have gone so high that people that buy into these, they sign away on these mortgages. Well, they own the house and they go to rent it. Well, now they have to charge all kinds of higher prices in the rental market, which you have two options: either you buy or you rent. And if you bought, then you're basically signing up to all kinds of debt and an agreement that you're going to be paying that back for 30, 40, 50 years. Probably never pay it back, to be honest, at these current rates. And your other option is to rent. And when rent here in Canada is, $1,500 in smaller cities a month just for a little bachelor suite, it's really hard to get ahead. When your average earnings in Canada is like $35,000 a year or something, the numbers are just staggering, and people are basically just living paycheck to paycheck in these cities trying to get by. They're struggling. They're not putting away any wealth for an economic crisis, to be able to save, to be able to get ahead. And they really don't have an option here, And so the only other option is to move into even smaller towns, move further out where there's less job opportunity and then you have the challenges of not having community, not having the luxuries of all these restaurants and stores and being able to go out and network and all that. So there's really no easy way around this. They kind of have us backed into a corner, and that's why I find it very frustrating what they've done to our generation. It's really criminal. So I think one of the few options we have is that we have something like Bitcoin that came along, where I think the smart millennials are buying Bitcoin. Instead of going into these large amounts of debt, they're investing in the potential of a new future currency that cannot be debased. So you're able to do that. You're able to buy into that with very minimal capital. You could invest $10, $100, whatever, and you're not signing some death contract with these corrupt bankers agreeing to pay back $500,000, $1 million, etc. And basically at any point you want, you could sell out of the market, you could buy in, all that. So I think that's one way that we might see a lot of opportunity, is that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity where we have a new, essentially global currency it's not owned by any one government. It can't be debased. It's decentralized, all that. This is a once in a lifetime thing. We don't have new currencies come along. This happens once every 100 years or so. So I think people are kind of missing the opportunity here. I don't think they're seeing what this is, but I think that could be a huge potential for millennials that are choosing to invest in this new technology, because this could be massive. As the governments continue to debase all of their currencies and we have inflation hitting, well, Bitcoin is has a set inflation schedule. So it's disinflationary. So the inflation of Bitcoin is always decreasing, and there's no way to debase it moving forward. So those that are investing in Bitcoin, there's less and less of it available, and more demand as people are looking for places to park their capital, while the governments are talking about going to negative interest rates and charging people to have savings. So the governments are pushing for everyone to be in debt. They want you in a vulnerable place. They want you relying on them. They want you holding all this debt at the mercy of interest rates and essentially having no resilience for you and your family. Because what creates resilience is when you have capital set aside. You have economic capital ready for a rainy day. If we go into crisis, you should be able to live for a year, 2 years without income. You should have that kind of money set aside, and very few do. Most people are holding $30, $40, $50,000 in student loan debt, and they can't even get a job. So this is just wild. You look at millennials compared to the boomers, and the boomers, very few people in the boomers went and got these crazy expensive university degrees. They actually went and got a trade at little to no cost. They went right to work. They started earning good money. Houses were still, $100,000. And now millennials are coming out of school at 30 to 35 years old. They have, $50,000 plus in debt. House prices are now, a detached house is well over $1 million in the big cities. And so the numbers don't equate. There's no opportunity. The game has changed. So I think that we have to look for new solutions. That's why I'm so interested in stuff like Bitcoin. I think it's part of the solution. I think boomers, it's going to take them a while to catch on to what Bitcoin is. They're not as tech savvy as the younger generations. So those of us that are tech savvy, I think we should be using this to our advantage. We should learn these new technologies, and we should be investing in them and holding them. And that way, when the boomers do start waking up and realizing their dollars are devaluing, they're going to be forced into these assets. So if we can kind of get a jump on that trend, then we can play that trend. And when they realize they need to get a hold of these assets, they'll have to come to us and buy it off us. It's like basically what's going on right now, where we need houses and we need to buy it off them, and they're holding it all and they're jacking prices because the demand's there. So we're kind of at the mercy of them, but it's up to us. We just need to stop buying. Just figure it out. Go rent somewhere cheap. Get out of the city. Stop wasting all your money away and living these luxurious lives, spending $5 a day on a latte and $10 to $15 on a cocktail with what little money you have, paying $1,500 a month in rent, buying all organic food, living paycheck to paycheck. You have to start thinking outside the box. If you ever want to get ahead, if you ever want to retire, create capital and stuff like that for yourself, you have to think outside the box. You have to get creative and you have to make sacrifices. So some of the ways you can do that are, downsize, move to a smaller community, a smaller town or whatever. Look for ways to cut down your spending, all of that. And don't buy into these death traps. Don't get a huge mortgage when we have such an uncertain economic future. Don't agree and sign a contract that you'll be making a payment for $500,000 to $1 million, that agreeing that you can pay that kind of money off and paying interest on it. I'm sorry, but most people aren't going to get ahead that way. The only time I believe you should be buying real estate is when it's cash flow positive, and very few deals, especially here in Canada, are cash flow positive at the moment. So that's why I think it's a good time to kind of keep our investment in real estate at a minimum, and people just need to stop buying it. It's only us. We're buying into this scam. We're buying into this idea that real estate can only go up, and we're destroying our future because we're exposing ourselves to just tremendous amounts of debt that will never be repaid. And that's not creating resilience in your own life, because when the economy tanks, how are you going to maintain a mortgage payment. It's wild. I mean, I guess the one saving grace is maybe when they do go negative, I think they are going to go negative, and then maybe you can earn a little bit of interest on that debt, but still you're not going to get ahead. You're going to be struggling probably for many decades to come to pay that off. And most people, I think, especially the millennials and the younger generations, those that did buy real estate are probably going to end up spending all of their capital on it, trying to hold that asset until they lose all of their capital and they can no longer afford it, and then they're going to be forced to sell probably at the low of a market cycle. So that's kind of my thoughts, and I think sadly enough what's going to happen is the banks are probably going to own pretty much all of the real estate. I think they're going to come in and buy it up. I think this is an intentional market crash. They want to de-stress these assets. I think that the Chinese have really come in and infiltrated here in Canada. They've taken over a lot of our government. They're manipulating our financial system. They're pushing everyone into these mass amounts of debt to basically bankrupt them and put them into a very vulnerable situation so that when they crash the markets, everyone's assets become distressed, and then they can come buy them up for pennies on the dollar and basically keep everyone in poverty and owing all this money. So I think we need to recognize some of these trends so that we can make better decisions. And me personally, I just believe in keeping my investment in these overinflated assets to a minimum. If you have all kinds of cash, sure, go in and buy something like that maybe. Or if you have the economic means, if you have some kind of business where you make a ton of money, sure, go in and buy one of these $1 million homes. But if you're making $60,000 a year or something like that, 70,000, under 100K a year, don't buy $1 million home. That's totally ridiculous. Unless you're able to rent it out for $5,000 a month, it just doesn't make sense. You got to crunch the numbers and don't just have your head in the sand assuming that these are good deals, assuming that this is going to make you money. I personally think the place to be investing moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years is in business. A lot of the boomers are looking to retire and they're going to be selling their businesses. They want to move out of the high stress business environment and more into retirement. And very few millennials and younger generations have the capital to come and buy these businesses because most of them have got suckered into this scam of paying astronomical amounts for their education and getting these useless degrees. And then the other ones have bought into real estate. So they've signed away and they've bought huge amounts of debt. That's all you've bought is an agreement with these banksters that you're going to be paying them back interest, huge amounts of money to borrow this debt money. And it's really, in my opinion, only going to put you behind. Unless you really know how to crunch the numbers and you're really careful with where you buy and you buy more as an investment. People are getting suckered into the American dream of home ownership, but that's just knocking us further into poverty. The game has changed, like I said, so we need to play it differently. And it's not working like it used to. You can't just go buy a home and get ahead. People that are buying a home for $1 million, you're just going backwards because the amount of money you're paying in interest and maintenance costs and all that, and you're just not getting that capital back in most of these areas because real estate is too overinflated. And moving forward, who's going to be able to maintain these high rent payments? If they said the unemployment's just doubled, I think, in the last month here in Canada, and they haven't even enforced another lockdown. So you look at how many businesses are going to go under, you look at what's happening in the unemployment levels, look at what's happening with mortgage deferrals. We have 20% of the country are deferring their mortgages. They cannot make their mortgage payment, and those deferrals end next month, I believe. So a lot of this hasn't even come to the surface. It's been papered over by the governments. They're papering over this economic crisis, and we haven't even seen what is actually coming. I don't think most understand how bad this is probably going to get, and people still have their head in the sand. They're still buying real estate. Real estate prices are still going up here in Canada. That's absolutely insane. We have the most horrific economic downturn in history, the worst jobless numbers, you know, everything is pretty much as bad as it can get moving forward. It doesn't look good moving forward, and yet real estate's still going up. So I don't know, guys. I think it makes more sense to sit on the sidelines. And if you are wanting to invest and put your capital somewhere, why don't you look at putting it into a business and creating, you know, a business that can generate you income so that you can have more capital and more freedom. And that if you're buying into real estate, it's very illiquid, and it's a bit of a death trap, if you ask me. So those are just some of my thoughts. I like to invest in stuff like precious metals, which are limited in supply, unlike these government currencies. And stuff like Bitcoin, I think, is a fantastic technology. I think Bitcoin will probably continue to climb. I'm shooting for 100,000, and wouldn't be surprised if we hit into $200,000-$300,000 per Bitcoin moving forward. And you know, just looking for other ways to get creative, maybe invest in a business, like I said, that kind of stuff. But real estate to me is everyone's all in. And when the masses are all in on something, that usually means start looking the other direction. So me personally, I'm keeping my investment in real estate at a minimum right now. I'm investing in other things. And I think that's something that most should be considering at this moment. I did just buy some raw land, as I do see a trend of everyone trying to leave the cities just because people are waking up. Who wants to own these condos? Who wants to live in a tiny little 300 square foot box when the governments are enforcing these lockdowns? You're going to go absolutely insane. You know, getting a little bit of fresh air leaning out your window, and it's just nuts. So I think people want more space, and I think we're going to see a trend of people leaving the cities. So that's personally why I bought some raw land in a more rural area, in a desirable area where it's close to a big lake and natural resources, hunting and fishing and all of that. So I bought that land just as a hedge against inflation, but I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to be spending my capital on building at the moment. I might just hold on to that as a hedge against inflation, and then I might look at diversifying my investment and probably investing more in business is what I'm starting to think. But I'm always thinking, I'm always changing my ideas. I like to stay curious and always explore new ideas. The environment is changing every day, and it's changing quickly. So I think it's critical to just kind of stay in a curious mind state and observe the trends and make decisions from there. So with that being said, I hope you guys are doing fantastic wherever you are. I hope you're having a great day, and that you guys are staying healthy, staying curious, and really taking the time, this kind of time where we're, you know, a bit of an economic downturn, take this time to gain a little bit of knowledge, learn about money and investing and real estate and trends and how to read charts, and really get yourself in a better position to make educated decisions so that we can all prosper a little more moving forward, and hopefully get ourselves in a better situation coming out of this whole crisis. With that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.